So welcome. I got exactly what I wanted, a lovely group that's all on one screen. I'm so lucky. Thank you for being here. So I'm Sarah Longfield. I don't sound like it, but I'm based up in Glasgow and I have been for years, where I used to run a young people's theatre company. A lot of my work has been in and around theatre, but it's mostly been in the world, I'm going to use the term today, of applied theatre. By that, I mean theatre that doesn't necessarily happen in traditional theatre spaces, or theatre that happens with people from all walks of life rather than professionally trained performers. And so a lot of my work has been around that sort of participatory arts end of the spectrum. I did a master's in cultural performance, which was a kind of 1990s term for applied theatre. The terms change, and we love, I think, in the arts, whittering on about what we should call things, and I think we should just generally come up with a consensus and crack on. But that's my focus. What I'm also going to be talking about today is specifically about coaching online, coaching in Zoom. So just out of interest, does anyone solely coach face-to-face in the room here? Excellent. Okay, I think it is applicable, but it's maybe one step removed from what we're talking about. We are recording it, but it depends on how interactive it is and things as to whether the recording will actually make it onto Nick's YouTube or not. And oh yeah, I was going to use quite an interactive Jamboard, but I think we might run out of time a bit, so it might just be me interacting with the Jamboard, but there aren't any slides as such, but there are, oh, the sun's come out, which is brilliant. It's been freezing all day. I'm just going to pull my blind over. Sorry. This is not a theatrical performance. Let's just pull it over. Okay. Shouldn't block out the sunshine in Glasgow, should I? Yes, so I'm not an academic. I'm not about to write a book on this. I come with lots of question marks and I've learnt by doing. But like I say, I've been spending, since I trained to be a coach, I've spent about 2.5 years trying to work out how my theatre practice and my coaching practice align. And it's only recently started to really coalesce in how it does. And I'm going to share with you some thoughts on that today, and I really also want to hear your thoughts. So yes, I come not as a sort of clever intellectual with a brilliant concept to share with you, but rather what I describe myself as an interrupter who provokes with a feather duster rather than a pointy stick. So yes, the magic of theatre though, right? You know, oh my goodness, when you're in a space where things are happening live, where there are humans expressing stories, where you're taken on a flight of imagination, and it's there and we're sharing it in the same time and the same space, magical. But you could apply just that to coaching as well. We're in this space together, this shared space. In fact, let me share a little quote. Oh, let's just make sure I'm on the right screen for it as well. I'm just sharing a very basic quote about, I was talking about applied theatre there. And this is from quite a long time ago. That's making me feel a bit conscious. Sorry, academic theatre person in the room. So, applied theatre, a theatre in which new modes of being can be encountered and new possibilities, oh, I put too many eyes in that, new possibilities for humankind to be imagined. Now, if we just crossed out applied theatre on that quote and put coaching, a space in which new modes of being can be encountered and new possibilities for humankind to be imagined, that's my starting point. In essence, what I was doing when I ran the Young People's Theatre Company that I ran for 13 years in Glasgow was giving young people a space. I was holding the space. I never said it like that, but it's, in essence, I was holding a space for young people to imagine potential futures, to raise their aspirations by experimenting, by wearing different hats, by taking on different ways of being and rewriting their narrative. Again, I never said it like that, but that's what was happening. So that's kind of where I see, and in its broadest, most basic terms, where I see my two practices of theatre and of coaching coalescing. I also see how within a coaching session, it's kind of like a one-to-one performance. Not with me as performer and client as audience, or the other way round, but as a two-way performance where we are in this special magical space that of course still embodies, what was Simon saying this morning about, yeah, it still embodies all those ecosystems that we're exploring, but at the same time, it's a space removed. And that's where I'd like to start. And then we'll see how much time we have as to how much further we can go on. But if this does pique your interest and you'd like to discuss further, I'm more than happy to hold some space for that. So let's talk about thresholds. There was a bit in narrative coaching. I don't know if any of you have made your way through David Drake's book. Take my scarf off at the same time. But it's a bit of a heavy text to wade through. I loved the meaning of it, but it was hard work. But there was a bit in that where it talks about inviting your client to cross a threshold. And I realized that's what I do in my practice as a facilitator across the board. I invite people to cross a threshold with me into a space where we can experiment. And before I go any further in that, I'd like to do a little visualization with you. Now, it's inviting you to come on a little journey of the imagination. And I appreciate visualization isn't for everyone. So if it doesn't work for you, I invite you to use this time to consider the context of where we're going on this path and use it as a welcome opportunity for relaxing for 5 minutes. It won't be long. But for those of you who are willing to take a little leap with me right now, firstly, I'd like you to root your feet on the ground. Connect with whatever sort of floor is supporting you and take a couple of deep breaths, ideally in through the nose and out through the nose. Now, if it feels okay, gently close your eyes and let me guide you into a plain white space. Welcome the person who's just joined us. We're just going into a short visualization. So we've just moved into this plain white space. We're moving away from our day so far. We're parking that for a moment. And we're taking a step into this place. It's neutral. It's a room of sorts. There seems to be walls containing it, but they're indistinct. There are no features in this room that define it. It's your blank canvas. I invite you to start illustrating this space. Illustrate it into a place where you feel calm and creative. Perhaps it's a particular place you're familiar with. Perhaps you want to make it into an imagined space that has features you find appealing. It can be an outside space. Those indistinct walls can melt away if you command them to. Maybe it's an indoor space where those walls can move and firm up, start to take on features and turn this space into a place with character. Regardless of what you've chosen, it's a place where you can be yourself without pressure, where you are free to imagine all sorts of possibilities. As this transformation occurs, Notice what sounds you can hear. What does the space smell of? Notice whether you are standing, sitting, or maybe even lying down. Which bits of your body are making contact with the space? How does that feel? What are the textures? Let's take a moment to enjoy this imagined space. And then in time, you feel a small object form in your hand. You look, and it's a tiny clear glass bottle with a cork stopper. You loosen the stopper and hold the bottle open, offering it to the room. Decide what the essence of this place is so that you can capture it in this bottle. Invite that essence to jump in. And when it has, you put the cork stopper back on. Now, when you're ready, I ask you to turn around. And in front of you is a doorway. Maybe it's in a wall, or maybe it's a doorway standing by itself with no wall to be seen, but it is a doorway. And it has a door and a very attractive door handle. With your bottle safely stowed on your person, please open that door and step through, returning to our present. So come back with me into the room with your imagined bottle stowed about your person somewhere. For me, when I'm coaching, I'm creating that imagined space for my clients. I don't necessarily take them through such a literal visualization. I suppose it's not literal, it's imaginative, but I don't necessarily go through that process. But I pay particular attention to very subtle things that I can do to invite my client to cross that threshold and move into a space where they feel comfortable, where they feel they can be them entirely themselves, be creative. And I'm not going to go too far down this pathway, but it's what, in anarchist theory, they're talking about temporary autonomous zones. Now, a lot of writing around temporary autonomous zones are really physical places like the Burning Man Festival in America, where people congregate in a desert where there is nothing, and they appear in this desert space and they can party without societal conventions sort of hanging over them quite in the same way, and then it disappears again. My thinking of a TAZ, a temporary autonomous zone, is that we can create that within our coaching experience. And it's certainly what I've always sought to create when I make theatre. When I was working with the young people through the Young People's Theatre Company, it was based in one of the most deprived areas of Glasgow where there were no arts venues. So when we got the funding to do a big show, we created a theatre like the circus coming to downtown in some ways, but we created a space, usually on a bit of waste ground. Ideally, if that you know, the place had no kind of connection to anything else, was the most brilliant spaces, although they're the most difficult spaces to suddenly pop up a theatre. But you create this space so that those young people weren't stepping into a theatre that they didn't really feel like belonged to them or not, or, you know, they were then walking into something that already had so much symbolism and meaning draped in it, but they were heading into a brand new space that we'd made just for their show. And the power of that sort of specialness was really tangible. And the first time I did it, it was a show all about the stars. And I took the main cast away. We just went up to Loch Lomond to a youth hostel. It doesn't exist anymore, sadly, but it's now posh flats. But it was a big old house, and we went and stayed away. And the guy came up with this massive telescope, because we were talking all about the stars, and it was a clear night. So we got to look through this telescope, and we saw Saturn and its rings, and we saw Jupiter and its moons. And I know I'm digressing a little bit, but it was very magical. The staff were kicking the kids out of the way because we were so entranced by this. But we took that, you know, it was like we kept the essence of that in our little bottle, and we took it into a big black dome of a tent that we built in a rough part of Glasgow. And oh, Marianne, I'm just gonna you muted yourself. Great. And there was just a bit of noise there. So we took that with us to create this temporary autonomous zone. And whether I am running a bit of training, or I'm putting on a retreat, or I'm working one-to-one with a client, I'm thinking, how can I create that temporary autonomous zone where magic can happen? So with that in mind, Zoom. I love Zoom. I absolutely love it. I love it for the fact that it's so convenient for my life, but I also love it because there's an artifice to what we're doing right now. You know, we're not all in a room together, but it's not like we're delving into the sort of world of film. We're still in the world of theatre. I'm going to keep going on this because I believe it. But we all have these equal rectangles. So there's an essence of mise en scène here in what we put in our rectangle can help create that temporary autonomous zone for our clients. So, you know, everything that I've chosen that's in this image for me has symbolism and it has meaning, right? The flowers are a gift from my lovely tutors on the retreat I ran this weekend, showing off there. But it's in a jug that belonged to my granny, and it's quite homely, and it's quite, you know, it's not a fancy crystal jug. It's on the piano, which I can't play, so I'm showing off a bit. And there's a color coordinated bookshelf that is always a conversation starter. I've created something that people can talk about. I coach writers, and some of them bloody hate this because it suggests I value the outside of a book more than the inside, which isn't true. But I do have, excuse my French, a slightly wankery bookshelf there. But people like colour, and they like stuff to, you know, and then there's a blank white space. I was lucky to happen to have these cupboards, you know, when 2020 occurred. But this is what I'm presenting to people, and this is what I can give. Now, it's not always possible. Like I'm looking at you know, like we've got some fuzzed backgrounds there. That works too, because oh my goodness, you're becoming Morgan Freeman in The Matrix, inviting Keanu to learn Kung Fu with that fuzzy background. Or maybe you've put in a virtual background, you know, like at it, you've got, I'm assuming you're not in Turkey right now or wherever it might be. But you know, you've got that setting that is giving me loads of visual cues that will change how you coach, right? And how your client's going to respond because they're talking to you. You know, I'm sure you've got some clients too who hide self-view. So your rectangle's all they see. So there's something really powerfully interesting about that kind of goes along with the theory that coaching is a theatrical act. With that in mind, I'm going to put you into breakout rooms to have a chat about what I've just been talking about, what's coming up for you, and what one thing might you change or enhance or keep that you've got going on. Oh, sorry, Santorini. You've got going on in your Zoom rectangle. Maybe it's something about yourself, maybe it's something about your background that you could change to create even more of that temporary autonomous zone that you're inviting your client into. Okay, so I'm just going to give you 10 minutes. I'll put 3 people in a room. Assign automatically, don't include the co-host. It'll be 2 or 3 people actually in a room. I'm going to give you 10 minutes, and I absolutely hate that countdown timer that lasts a minute. What weird limbo. That's a temporary autonomous zone I don't like. So it's got 10 seconds. So when it's countdown, when you're out, you're out. Okay, any questions before you go in? Did anybody lose it there and can't remember what I've asked them to do? It's fine to be honest.
Just to say, Sarah, I'm going to have to go in about 5 minutes, so maybe I should go in a room with at least 2 other people so I don't leave anybody on their own, if that's possible.
That's a good point.
Sorry to be a pain.
No problem. Yes, you are in a room with 2 other people, so that's fine. Okay, all right, off you go. Thank you, Catherine. Okay, welcome back. It wasn't Morgan Freeman, was it? It's Lawrence Fishburne. If anyone was going to teach me Kung Fu, I'd like it to be Morgan Freeman, please. Anyway, apologies. And if you totally missed my reference there, let's move on. Who would like to share a thought, a question, an idea that came up in your breakout space? Kate.
Hi. I thought it was really interesting, just this idea of coaching, like acting, because I'm an actor and I'd never actually thought about coaching in that way. But one thing that came to mind for me was this idea of some of the training I've done around sort of Meisner, where when you're in a situation with another actor, that you really have to focus on them and give your full attention to this person and then respond how they make you want to respond. So obviously it's not as structured as coaching, but it really emphasized to me this idea of when you're in that coaching session, you really need to sort of strip away yourself and really focus on the person that you're working with to have the best experience for that person and yourself in the moment. And it just reminded me of the kind of acting sessions that I'd done at drama school and that type of thing. And also the work that you do as an actor to try and strip away yourself to really become a different character. And that when you're on stage, you really have to sort of get rid of your mental chatter to have the best performance and be ready to perform. And I suppose that for me felt like what you would need to do in a coaching session.
Yeah, presence. You know, one of the biggest skills I taught the young people I directed was to stand in neutral. And it was the hardest thing for them to achieve, that when, you know, you ask them to stand without conveying anything, but to be really present and to stand with energy so that, you know, they weren't looking like they'd got lost and wandered onto a stage, that they were there for a purpose and there for a reason. But you know, it's that kind of standing in neutral, being present, that I really relate to when I'm being a coach. And when I feel my internal chatters coming in, what I'm doing is finding a neutral where I am connected and energized and listening deeply, but I'm in neutral. Any other thoughts? We don't have to fill it. It's okay. Oh, is it Renata?
Renata, yes. I wanted to share that we experimented a little bit with adjusting camera. So how it can look like that we're looking into each other's eyes without, you know, it's not possible on Zoom, but how you can level the cameras that it feels more like that. And it was interesting. I think I hadn't done that in any of my sessions. Of course, it depends if the client feels comfortable with that, but I really felt a different kind of connection. It felt like I'm looking into Maximilian's eyes, even though, again, I know it's not possible.
And just to follow
Yannick talks. Sorry, Maximilian.
I was in the same, it was Renato and I in that session. And I also, just to add that act, the beginning of both trying to move our cameras, although we're in a digital space, there is a connection that forms. And so as a coach, actually, though you might be in your same space all the time, with each client, it might be different. So it's like shaking someone's hand through the ether, or even giving them a hug through the ether. You're just correcting that creates some kind of bond.
Yeah, that there's something really powerful about eyeline. Yannick Jacob is talking next. I'm always fascinated by what he says, but he talks a lot about eyeline, and he was trying to find a way. He ended up with like an auto cue, so he could see the person right in front of his camera, so that you could always be with eye contact. I found that when someone makes eye contact too much with me on Zoom, my brain doesn't like it anymore, because I've had 2 and a bit years of getting used to being, I'm slightly over there, or I'm slightly over there. And that feels okay and safe. And occasionally someone can make a point by, making that eye contact and it feeling much more powerful. So that's how I tend to use it, for emphasis, or for really, here's my most powerful question, or whatever. Or yeah. I'm laughing there because, is it Mariana? Am I pronouncing it right? Yeah. She just did a very particular look to the camera. That how to unnerve your client 101. But yeah, it's a powerful thing, because we've now managed to cope. What I don't like is when somebody has 2 monitors or something. And I was being coached by someone actually who was in the same ICF mentoring group as me, and I was down here. And he was talking to me like this, and I was like, I'm too far away. It's really disconnected. Really interesting. Any other thoughts, or shall we move on? I see no one reaching for the unmute, so we will move on. It's interesting, Kate, you were talking about, stuff you learned at drama school and things, and there's a couple of ones. Here's narrative coaching, by the way. That's the David Drake book I mentioned. If anyone's not, it's dense. My God, I challenge one of you to write a better version of narrative coaching, more easier to digest, because I like easy to digest coaching books that don't leave me bored, even when they're really interesting. But yeah, when I was doing A-level theatre studies down in Slough, the first thing we study is Stanislavski, and it's not something I have ever used, because I work with young people and adults and tiny people through devised work, through absolute uber presence in the room, by working with people to come up with ideas so that they're the experts. Just like in coaching, the people I work with are the experts in making their own theatre. Stanislavski, is like your Marlon Brando, getting really into the character. It's the system, the method, that way of working where you know absolutely everything about a part that you are playing. It led to Daniel Day-Lewis having a bit of a breakdown playing Hamlet. It's far too, I always felt it was far too hefty and far too serious for me. Narrative coaching starts mentioning Stanislavski, and I'm suddenly like, oh, actually, that stuff I've learned about is finally useful. Because of that, a client might be talking about a particular situation where they felt overwhelmed, where they felt upset, it was an emotional situation. As a coach, I want to know what happened before that, what happened after that, who were the other characters in that, how did they relate to the protagonist, to the client. So it's not necessarily about taking on a performative role of a particular character, but it's working with the actor, as it were, to work out what's happening in that, so that you can reframe that narrative and support, so the client can reframe their narrative. You can support them to rewrite that story in a way that's useful and is going to serve them better. And I find that really interesting, that there are lots of elements of theatre theory that create certain types of theatre that may or may not be to your taste, but that they can be sort of plucked out of there and thrown into the coaching space and be really useful. And with that in mind, I was going to have a little look at perceptual positioning, or the 3 chairs that you may, is that familiar to people? Kind of thinking vaguely. Ondine's shaking her head. Okay, so I'll, right, I'm just going to bring up, in fact, right, we do have enough time. if you're used to using Jamboards and you'd like to sort of join in at the points where I say you can, please do. Here's the link. Otherwise, I'll share my screen of it and you can just watch. I appreciate if you're joining on your phone or whatever, it might be a bit too complicated to join in. But perceptual positions is, I'm going to make them a bit bigger because if you are looking on your phone, you probably won't be able to see these particularly well. Welcome, anonymous coyote. So we have 3 kind of positions here, and the idea is in perceptual positioning that you kind of focus on each one, and you maybe invite your client to speak, you know, as that particular character, as it were, which is exactly the same as when you do theatre hot seating. You get a character in a chair and you ask them questions. So you've got the protagonist, your client's first person perspective. This is how they felt in this situation. But maybe the person they were connecting with or having some sort of interesting relationship dialogue with, often the antagonist, not necessarily, but the second character, actually answering some questions where you put yourself in their shoes can provide some clarity, some enlightenment. And then, you know, you can bring in, maybe it's a fictional character here of the third person. You know, what would an observer do? When we learnt this in training, we also had what the universe might say. So we zoomed right out, and we did it on Zoom, and, you know, and we actually had, you know, you sat in a different chair to embody those different characters or to answer questions with those different characters. So I'll use the example actually that happened in our training because I absolutely loved it. So the issue that somebody brought was that they felt they had an unhealthy relationship to their smartphone. So the first person was themselves. The second person was their phone. You know, an observer was just, you know, perhaps just somebody looking in through the window. We also had the universe there. But if we were being playful and, you know, approaching this perhaps in a more theatrical way, who else might have an opinion? So, all right, I'm just going to make everybody a little bit smaller. So if you do want to put your actual physical hand up, if you have something to chip in, otherwise I won't see you. But yeah, we've got some post-it notes. You can click on the side to create a post-it note and you can add something in. So when I was playing around with this in my mind earlier, I thought, you know, a particular phone app might have something to say, maybe that person's most used app. So I'm going to be a bit tongue-in-cheek here, and I'm going to say Tinder has an opinion. So Tinder could be a character in this story that we could explore. How does that app feel if that person renegotiates their relationship to their smartphone? Who else? What else? Inanimate objects can have an opinion in this situation. Any ideas?
The person's partner.
Yeah. So another character in... Hello, baby. Another character sort of in the scene, as it were, isn't it? Someone who's going to have an opinion, who has an investment in that protagonist's outcomes. Who else could feature in here?
The mobile company, like who's getting payments for your use of the phone.
Yeah. Yeah, they'll have some opinions. Anyone else?
Online.
Oh, sorry, Chris, you first.
Their boss or the manager, superior.
Yeah, I'll put their boss, but that could mean all of those things. Gabriella.
I was thinking their online friends or maybe even their likes.
Oh, the people, yeah, they connect with through their social media and things. And then I think you could push it a little further. So we could be going into the realm of frustration as a character. How does frustration feel in this situation? Or what other characters might there be? Distraction. Oh, distraction and frustration might have an interesting dialogue to have.
FOMO,
I also think there's a, sorry, yes, Renata.
I was just saying FOMO, like the fear of missing out. Like,
oh yeah, they'd have opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe their energy level.
Oh yes, great.
Maybe jealousy, because I think everyone can get jealous of their partner's focus on their mobile phone.
Yeah. Yeah, an energy level. I'm also thinking maybe with the distraction, what are they being distracted from? So maybe that comes into their boss and their work, or maybe, yeah, maybe they're being distracted from their unhealthy relationship with their partner, or lots of conjecture there and ideas. But in essence, playing around with that, pushing it further playfully, like you would in when you're kind of following a bit of a Stanislavski line of thought in who's in the room, who's operating, is a playful way of potentially getting to the nub of it, especially when there's a situation which feels quite sort of surfacey. I just want to stop using my phone so much. I want to stop doom scrolling. I want to, you know, and I have a lot of clients who bring things like that, when actually finding a way to be quite playful to discover those things can be an interesting approach. Obviously, it's not for everybody, and I would always offer it rather than say, now we're going to play a game. Yeah, it's sort of an offer of, and especially if you're getting those kind of, your client keeps saying the same thing. You know, they're getting stuck in a bit of a rhythm where perhaps you're in session 3 and they're saying the thing that they've kind of repeated, and you think, right, what can we do here as an interrupter, as a catalyst, as, you know, someone tickling the world with a feather duster? How can you move that on? And I have, you know, most of the time when you say, can I offer, you know, can I offer an observation here, or can I offer what I'm noticing? Your client says yes. But my clients, some of them know that I might go a little bit more experimental or a bit playful, and they'll say, I've got a little exercise, you know, a little game here that we could play. And they, thankfully, I've contracted well enough that they say, no thanks, or say, let's go for it. And I like that we can get to a place, because I always say it's not going to hurt my feelings. You know, this isn't a normal conversation. I'm going to suggest things to you, but you're the expert. You're the one who knows what will stick and what won't. And I suppose that's the same, you know, when somebody's working on a character that they're going to perform on stage, they become that expert, or they're performing them as themselves. So that is one demonstration, I suppose. That one's more about kind of narrative, formulation
Sarah,
of new narratives. Yes.
Can I ask something?
Yes.
So how would you go about that? Would you let the client come up with these post-its that we just thought of, or?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I might actually, I've never used a Jamboard before, but that might help. And you know, go a little, I'm not a time to think coach, far from it. But I think maybe I might be in that situation of who else, what else, and push it, and then give the client the choice of, okay, who should we question here? And to, you know, to walk the walk, to sit in the shoes of those different characters could then, yeah, and you don't have to cover all of them. It might be that you're just mentioning the atmosphere of tension in the room as a character, or the lampshade, but they might not be interesting ones to speak to, or they might be. If I was leading it with that particular situation, I'd be straight in there on distraction. What are you being distracted from? You know, if I was mentoring, but I'm not, because what actually, it could be 101 different things, couldn't it? between that relationship with the phone, as you were pulling out lots of different perspectives. And I suppose as coach, you know, there's also that slight performative role of detective, isn't it? Of going, I know nothing, and I'm here to try and work out what makes you tick. I think it comes from coaching a lot of creatives, a lot of whom are neurodivergent, a lot of whom want to approach things very specifically their way, that they're rebels. So, you know, I don't have a fixed way of, you know, how I like to use accountability with my clients, but I love giving suggestions of these are some ways some of my clients have used accountability. What might work for you if a client has said that accountability would be useful? And let them kind of invent their own version, because that's far more powerful and it's more likely to work than going, right, let's look at this worksheet on accountability. Worksheets. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts where we are at now? Okay. I'd like to say thank you, because it's been a long day. If some of you have been with it all the way through, it's a heck of a lot of Zoom, and thank you for still being with me. Okay, one other exercise that is really kind of pushing it quite far, and I'm going to confess I have never done this with a client, but I would very much like to. So if any of you are like, yeah, I want to do this, I actually want it done to me as well, I think. So this is around, oh, that's going to sound wrong, but I'm going to say it, the voices in your head. So, you know, your inner critics, your inner mentors, the different pushes and pulls, the aspects of your personality, the things, you know, the different aspects that might stop you from achieving things, the things that will help you achieve things. And I have worked quite a lot with my own coach on this, at my kind of insistence of like, I want to unpick these, I want to name these. And I've got to a point where I have 4 main characters. Obviously, other characters come in and out, but I have these 4 main characters. So I'm going to use them as an example just now. We'll go back into the Jamboard and go on to the next slide. So I have 4 characters that I've given names to. One is the nuanced adult, which is kind of who I'd like to be most of the time. You know, this is very sort of transactional analysis-y. You know, the nuanced adult is confident, she's secure, she knows what she's doing, she knows that she's got skills and abilities, and she can just stride forth and achieve stuff. And when I'm in that zone, everything feels fabulous. But sometimes it can also feel a bit boring. So another character I very much have is the playful joker. And I am naturally, my strengths all kind of point towards it. I'm a bit of an interrupter. So the playful joker is hugely useful in things like facilitating, in getting clients, making sales, in being able to kind of get through the ickiness of getting content online, of writing stuff. The playful joker is kind of my creative part. The rock is, you know, this is me as a mother, as a single mum. I am the reliable one. Everyone can rely on me. I'm going to absorb everybody's worries. Obviously, there are some pros and cons, maybe more cons than pros to being the rock. But she's a useful character and I need her, but sometimes I need to contract a little bit to get her to shut up a bit. And the mother's daughter, and I apologize to my mother for this name, but the mother's daughter is an extremely judgmental person who will just look at a situation, look at a person and just make an immediate judgment, not always positive. And that's the character in my head I dislike the most. That's the inner critic. The mother's daughter stops me from achieving stuff, but she also stops me from oversharing. She stops me from being too much of an idiot. So here's the characters. The exercise I'd love to do is to then, oh, I can't see the chat, so I'm going to pull it up just here. Nice. And I think as well, in terms of you developing your coaching style, if any of you were in the authenticity workshop with Hattie Volker earlier, you know, that's the coaching style for me is about a combination of these things, maybe less of the mother's daughter, but definitely the playful joker and the nuanced adult are kind of the two that I run my business with, kind of the heart and the head. Okay, so these are 4 characters in search of a playwright. I'd like to cast them, and I'd like to just throw it out to you. So who would you cast? You know, famous actors, people we know of, people in the public eye. Who would be the nuanced adult, do you think? Someone unmute and just shout it out.
Meryl Streep.
That was the one. Yes. Meryl Streep, I agree. That's definitely Meryl. Okay. Who'd be the playful joker? No idea is a bad idea here.
Ryan Reynolds.
Brilliant. I can't remember who I had for that. It wasn't Ryan Reynolds, but Ryan Reynolds is better. Yes. Okay. So we've got there. The Rock. I think it's got to be The Rock. It's got to be The Rock, hasn't it? Yes. Even though it doesn't really, but he's quite reliable. He's quite solid. Yes, I think we've got to have, I won't put one in because it says it already. And the mother's daughter, who would play that role? It's a trickier one. I'm putting one in. Oh, spell it right.
No. No. I would have put her on the playful joker. How no?
Well, yeah, but I think she can do this role well. But maybe not. Oh God, right. I think maybe we could just go the whole hog with this one and put. I don't want her in my head, but I just went extreme there. So we've got these characters now, and now I kind of got a vision of what they look like. It's quite good. There's a nice gender split. I'm going to have to. Oops. Oh, why have I done that? I don't know why I've done that. That's not what I mean to do. I once washed my hands next to Helena Bonham Carter. You didn't need to know that, but I thought I'd throw it in. Wayne Johnson. I feel like it for balance and for sort of colour symmetry, we need them there. So we've got these characters, we know what they look like, and then I'd want to give them a scenario, and it could be a completely random scenario. So I have like 4 scenarios I wrote out earlier. I think sort of doing that to the client, that it's really random, and you know, maybe I'd have a hat with 20 in. This always worked really well when I was working with young people, because you know, giving them too much to have to decide could be really overwhelming, but just having something. So I'm just going to pick this one, so that all these characters are on a craft retreat. Now, we don't necessarily need to go through the entire step-by-step process, but what I'd be looking to do there is play it out. Okay, so we're on the craft retreat. We'll do a bit of a visualization, and I'd be asking the client, you know, so what's happening? Where are people positioned? What sort of craft is it? Who speaks? Who's not speaking? Is anyone bringing a bit of an atmosphere? We just start to illustrate, but playfully. We've taken these characters outside of the head, outside of where they're potentially kind of causing the most heftiness, potentially some damage. And we've put them out into this fictional situation. So they're in this scenario, and we explore things like that. If it's working, if it's starting to kind of give some interesting points of reflection, which I think when something's sort of taken out of context and pushed a little bit further away is where I get my biggest light bulb moments, because then I'm able to be observer rather than protagonist. So we move it a bit further away, and then, yeah, I'll throw in a situation. So something happens in that, and we look at how these characters react. The fire alarm goes off. Somebody runs through naked. They get attacked by a tiger. No worries. You did say earlier anyway, Renata, thank you for coming. So yeah, a situation happens, we look at how everyone reacts, and then we freeze it and we create statues of those characters. That's where we could even go into sort of embodiment, like what physically, how are they holding themselves? Where's their tension? What do they look like as these sculpted pieces of bronze? There's a plaque at the bottom of each of these statues. What's written on the plaque? So kind of just taking the story further and further. And maybe there's just one word on each of the plaques. So we take those words and we take them back into our temporary autonomous zone of a coaching space. And we're in that place where we could start a conversation, maybe based on those words. So we don't have to talk necessarily about the imaginative scene that we've just created. That can be silly, that can be ephemeral, that can be light. So it doesn't matter if there doesn't need to be that emphasis of getting it right or getting it wrong, but we can go there and see what happens. It wouldn't be for everyone. I have a client who's a writer who I suggested doing a visualization with. And she tentatively said yes. I maybe should have questioned the tentativeness a little bit more, but we went for it and it just wasn't for her. The way her mind works, she didn't like being on the spot in that moment, just making stuff up. It's not for her at all. But then finding people where, yeah, and it does seem to be creatives, it does seem to be, and along with creativity often comes neurodivergence. There are some people where I think that's where the gold is. Thoughts on that? Chris?
Sorry, I had a question which isn't completely following on from what you just said, but and so do come back to it or ignore it. But I'd like to hear more about how you get those 4 original characters in the first place, because that seems to be that's the sort of foundation on that exercise, and it's a great exercise. But that's the bit I just kind of missed. That they seem like very well thought out. Your 4 characters, very very well thought through.
I've had a few coaching sessions on them, I suppose. Yeah, so it was situations like I'd be bringing into the coaching space. It's really frustrating me why I can't get this thing done. And then we'd look at unpicking. Well, what is it that's stopping you, and where's that coming from? And I think it was me actually doing it rather than my coach, although my coach is a theatre maker, the one I was working with at that point. And so was willing to run with it. I was starting to form kind of characters, and I was talking about my best self or my most exciting self or my, when I feel like I'm really thriving in different situations, there was characters emerging, or when I'm not thriving and what's coming out there. So it was quite an organic process. But now you say it, maybe there's a way of speeding that up. That would require some further thought, but I think maybe there is a way of perhaps, just through a session working through who your inner critics are and who your inner mentors are. There's a good visualization, although I can't listen to it without falling asleep, which maybe it's not that good. She's got a very sort of ululating American accent that sort of just seems to send me off to sleep. But Tara Moore, who wrote the book Playing Big, which is focused on women playing bigger, but I think the visualization is about connecting with your inner mentor, who is yourself 20 years time. And it's that person in 20 years time where things have panned out in its broadest sense. And so you visualize meeting, and this is, I use this one a lot. And I've had it done to me is not the right phrase. I've worked through it as a coachee as well, where you meet yourself in 20 years time and things have panned out, and they have a conversation with you. And I think using some of that visualization that I did earlier of creating the space first, where you feel calm and at rest, and maybe your mentor is waiting for you there, or maybe the mentor comes and joins you in that space. But mine made me cry. She was quite blunt, because I just surrendered myself to it and just let it, appear in my head what this mentor was saying, and it surprised me. And I think when you use those kind of, you push it a bit further, I suppose, you're willing to sort of delve into using some theatrical techniques to really make that visualization powerful. You really set the scene and you give it context. And you make sure that your client is in a space where they can really feel free to sort of experiment, and there's no right or wrong. It's just what happens. That can be hugely powerful. I had a client who actually does work in theatre. Maybe it's theatre people it works best on. I'm not sure. No, it worked well with a visual artist as well. But I had a client who the inner mentor was sitting in a very particular chair. And afterwards, she described this chair and she said, I now really, really want that chair. So in 20 years' time, I will have that chair. And she's recently, I was coaching her around making a step up in her career and moving on. She very much wanted a leadership role of an organization, which she starts next month. And when she was given that job, she went out and bought the chair. So it only took a year. 19 years early, she now owns that chair. But there's something in that, where you let your imagination go on that flight of fancy. But then that inner mentor for me is an absolute combination of nuanced adult and playful joker. My kind of aspirational character types in my head. There's probably much better sort of academic terms for those, and I keep interchanging them, but I'm more of a doer. Does that answer? Okay. Any other thoughts, questions, complaints? Okay. What I'd like to do is we need to finish a bit earlier. So we're finishing at 22. So we've got 8 minutes. I'm going to pop you into a very swift 5-minute breakout room just to have a chat, because it's easier to chat with other people. So I'll recreate them, I'll mix them up and just have a chat. There's no real thing here. It's just what's come up for you, what's coming up for you, and how might it work in your practice. Okay, so, and then we'll come back for a very brief, like, blah, at the end. Okay, everybody ready? Off you go. Hello, welcome back. I'm going to pop into the chat my contact details. If you want to carry on talking about this, you want to have a shot at exploring these characters, I don't know, talk more. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, there's my website, there's my email address. So if you want to talk more, just ping me an email and we can have a chat about that. And maybe bring together a group if there's I know there's a couple of other people who can't make it today who are interested in general in this. But yes, we have 1 minute left. So let's just bombard the chat with a word. Come up with a word that sums up the last hour and 20 minutes of your life. Single word. If you really can't think of a word, think of several words. Invigorating, lovely, playful, creativity, imagination expanding. I like the heighten. That's allowed. Thought-provoking. Lots to digest. Fireworks. Oh, Undine, I love it. Thought-provoking, useful, as. Yeah, the actual writing on that is a bit full on, but I do like the idea of a TAS. Well, that is us. I think it's about 10 minutes or 10-minute break before Yannick starts, if you are joining that bit. And if not, I wish you a very lovely evening. Thank you so much for being a gorgeous group of people to work with.
Thanks, Sarah. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks so
everyone.
much. That was
Thank you so
brilliant.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah.
Lovely to meet you
Bye-bye.
all and to see you again.